Today, I will introduce you to 7 real and deeply disturbing experiments that have sparked significant ethical controversy. While the initial experiments are unsettling, they escalate to levels that can only be described as horrifying. The Revival Experiment. In 1932, a doctor named Robert Cornish, a remarkable prodigy who had earned his doctorate by the age of 22, conceived of an idea: to resurrect the dead. He designed a device resembling a teeter-board, onto which he would place a human cadaver. He would then inject the body with a chemical mixture to thin the blood and fuse it with oxygen, and begin rocking the apparatus to promote circulation. After attempting to revive several human corpses, none were successfully brought back to life. Consequently, Cornish shifted his focus from humans to dogs. He acquired 5 dogs for his experiments, and ultimately 2 of them were, in essence, revived. However, the success was grim. Both animals were left blind, in a permanent non-lucid state, and did not survive for long. Following this partial success, Cornish felt ready to attempt the procedure on a human subject once more. But this time, he required a corpse that was only very recently deceased. Coincidentally, a suitable candidate appeared in 1945. A young girl named Thora Chamberlain went missing after school, taken by a stranger. The police investigation linked her disappearance to a man named Thomas, who was subsequently convicted of her murder. His sentence was death, to be carried out in the gas chamber. Before the execution, Cornish contacted the authorities with a proposal: to be allowed to take Thomas's body after the sentence was carried out in an attempt to revive him. This created a significant legal and ethical problem. If Thomas were successfully resurrected after his legal execution, he would have to be set free, as he could not be executed a second time for the same crime. Ultimately, the authorities denied Cornish's request. After this, Cornish seemed to largely abandon his ambitions of human resurrection. At that time, a film titled Life Returns was produced, exploring the moral issues surrounding the revival of humans and animals. Robert Cornish himself starred in the film, playing the role of a doctor attempting to resurrect deceased people and dogs.
Number 2. The Vipholm Experiment. In 1945, in the Swedish city of Lund, there was a hospital named Vipholm. This was no ordinary hospital, but a psychiatric institution dedicated to the care and treatment of patients with mental conditions. The majority of the patients housed here were classified as intellectually disabled. To put this in perspective, an average person has an IQ score between 85 and 115, whereas individuals with intellectual disabilities typically score below 70. This means their capacity for reasoning, logic, and analysis is significantly impaired. One day, a group of researchers arrived to the hospital to conduct an experiment on 660 of its patients. The study involved providing the subjects with large quantities of chocolate, toffee, and caramel in between their regular meals. After a period of this diet, every single participant developed severe tooth decay. For 50 of the subjects, the damage was so extensive that their teeth were almost completely destroyed. The motivation for this study stemmed from a widespread public health issue at the time: rampant tooth decay, the cause of which was not definitively known. Researchers suspected a link to sugary foods, and the Vipholm patients were chosen to test this hypothesis. The experiment confirmed their suspicions, concluding that sugar is the direct cause of cavities. This experiment has been heavily criticized on ethical grounds, primarily because it was conducted without the consent of the participants. Due to their intellectual disabilities, the patients were incapable of providing informed consent. It is also noted that the study was sponsored by the candy industry. When the results unequivocally proved that their products caused tooth decay, significant conflicts arose between the researchers and their sponsors before the findings were finally published. In the end, while the Vipholm experiment was scientifically successful, it remains a deeply controversial case in medical ethics.
Operation Sea Spray. This experiment took place in the San Francisco area of the United States. It began with an elderly man named Edward Nevin, who was in a weakened state following a recent surgery. He died suddenly and unexpectedly. Upon examination, doctors discovered a bacterium in his system identified as Serratia marcescens. This was an extremely rare bacterium, one that should not have appeared naturally in the region. At the same time, approximately 10 other individuals were diagnosed with infections linked to the very same bacterium. Although all 10 of them recovered, physicians feared the beginning of an epidemic. But then, just as suddenly as it appeared, the outbreak ceased. The entire event was highly unusual. The reason for this occurrence was later revealed. In the aftermath of World War II and during the subsequent Cold War, the United States government harbored a significant fear: a covert biological weapons attack. To prepare for such a scenario, the U.S. military devised a plan. In 1950, a Navy ship positioned off the coast of the San Francisco Bay began to spray a mist containing vast quantities of bacteria. The purpose was to deliberately release these microorganisms into the city to study their dispersal patterns. The post-experiment analysis revealed that 800,000 people had been exposed, essentially the entire population of the city. The bacteria they used were Bacillus globigi and the aforementioned Serratia marcescens. These were chosen because they were believed to be harmless. However, it was later discovered that in rare cases, particularly in individuals with compromised immune systems, Serratia marcescens could be lethal. This was not an isolated event. Between 1950 and 1975, the U.S. conducted numerous other tests involving the release of bacteria over populated areas. The revelation of these experiments later sparked widespread public outrage.
The poison laboratory. This test was conducted in the Soviet Union within its network of labor camps known as gulags. The Soviet Union established these camps to imprison a wide range of individuals, who were then subjected to grueling hard labor regardless of their gender. During the period from 1921 to 1991, a disturbing pattern emerged. After finishing their meals and returning to their barracks, some prisoners would begin to exhibit symptoms, such as nausea, difficulty breathing, and paralysis. Invariably, all who showed these symptoms perished. The man responsible for their deaths was Grigory Marinovsky, a biochemist who headed a secret poison laboratory. Marinovsky systematically introduced various toxins into the prisoners' food. The substances he used included potent poisons like ricin and cyanide, which cause rapid death. He also experimented with curare, a paralytic agent, digitoxin, which affects the heart, and even mustard gas, a chemical weapon that causes severe blistering on the skin and can be fatal. The objective of these extensive and brutal experiments was to develop a perfect assassination weapon, a poison that was completely tasteless, odorless, and undetectable in a victim's body post-mortem. Ultimately, the research led to the creation of a compound that met these criteria, known as C2. Upon exposure to C2, a victim would feel a sense of calm, followed by minor convulsions, before dying within approximately 15 minutes. Although C2 was developed, the various poisons from this program continued to be used in targeted assassinations. Here are a few notable cases. In 1947, Bishop Theodore Ramja survived an assassination attempt when a Red Army truck crashed into his horse-drawn carriage. While recovering in the hospital, a nurse administered what was supposed to be medicine. He soon experienced stiffness, had difficulty breathing, and died. It was later understood that he had been killed with a fatal injection of curare. Having failed with the truck, the Soviets succeeded with poison. Decades later, in 1978, a journalist named Georgy Markov was waiting for a bus when a stranger jabbed him in the leg with an umbrella. Markov felt a sharp pain and was hospitalized, dying 4 days later. An examination revealed a tiny metal pellet embedded in his leg, which contained the poison ricin. His death is widely believed to have been a politically motivated assassination. More recently, in 2018, a man and a woman were found unconscious on a park bench. They were identified as Sergei Skripal, a former Russian double agent for the UK,
and Yulia, his daughter. Both had been poisoned with Novichok, an extremely potent nerve agent. Investigators later found a discarded perfume bottle in a nearby bin that contained the substance, leading them to believe the agent was sprayed onto the victims as a means of assassination. These three incidents are among many assassinations linked to Russia and the Soviet Union, and the poisons used were often the direct result of the experiments pioneered by Grigory Myronovsky.
The focal sepsis theory. This experiment involves the treatment of mental illness in the early 20th century. In 1907, a psychiatrist named Dr. Henry Cotton worked at the Trenton Psychiatric Hospital. Dr. Cotton became exceedingly famous at the time for developing a new treatment for mental illness, which he claimed had a very high success rate. His work attracted the attention of another psychiatrist, Dr. Phyllis Greenacre. Upon hearing of his methods, she became suspicious and decided to investigate. When Dr. Greenacre visited the hospital, she discovered a shocking sight. The patients had no teeth. Dr. Cotton's theory was that mental illness was the result of a localized infection somewhere in the body. He believed that to cure the patient, one simply had to surgically remove the infected part. In his view, the most common source of infection was the teeth. Therefore, he routinely experimented by extracting his patient's teeth. If tooth extraction proved ineffective, he would proceed to remove the tonsils, sinuses, and even sections of the intestines. He publicly declared an 85% success rate, though this claim was entirely unsubstantiated. Dr. Greenacre's investigation revealed that many patients were not cured, many remained unstable, and the surgeries resulted in a high number of fatalities. Despite these serious accusations, Dr. Cotton's career remained successful until he died. Only after his death was the deeply flawed nature of his methods widely acknowledged.
The Tuskegee and Guatemala syphilis studies. This experiment involved the disease of syphilis. In 1932, a group of African American men working as sharecroppers were targeted for a study by the U.S. Public Health Service. They were offered free medical care, but it was a deception. Approximately 600 men were enrolled, and those with syphilis were informed they had bad blood, but were deliberately denied treatment. The medication they received was largely ineffective, as the true purpose of the study was to observe the natural, unimpeded progression of syphilis. Initially planned for 6 months, the experiment extended for a staggering 40 years. During this time, approximately 100 participants died directly from the disease or its complications, and dozens of others, including wives and children, were also infected. This infamous project was not an isolated event. In 1946, in Guatemala, a study was conducted in which approximately 1,300 people, mostly soldiers, were deliberately infected with syphilis, gonorrhea, or chancroid without their knowledge. They spread the disease by directly injecting soldiers or by injecting women so that it would later be transmitted to men. The stated purpose was to test a potential cure, but researchers were unable to control the study, and only about 700 of the participants ever received treatment. This experiment was so scandalous that when it was finally brought to light, the President of the United States and the Secretary of Health had to issue a formal public apology.
The Nazino Island Affair. This is one of the most notorious events in Soviet history. In 1933, Soviet prisons were overflowing with petty criminals and peasants. As a solution, the authorities devised a plan to deport these prisoners to remote, uncultivated lands to relieve the prisons and develop the territory. One of the chosen locations was Nazino Island, a small, desolate island in the middle of a river. Approximately 6,700 deportees were transported there. Upon their arrival, the prisoners were provided only with one type of food, sacks of raw flour, in grossly insufficient quantities and with no tools to process it. Consuming the raw flour mixed with river water induced severe dysentery. Panic soon set in. Guards shot those who tried to escape. As the meager food supply dwindled, vicious gangs formed, seizing food through violence. In time, the flour ran out completely.
The only remaining source of sustenance on the island was human flesh. The deportees began to kill and eat one another. In the end, the experiment resulted in the deaths of 4,000 people from starvation, disease, exposure, and murder. The failure was total, a result of the brutal weather, inadequate provisions, and the complete lack of agricultural skills among the deportees. The result was a catastrophe on Nazino Island. And so, those are the stories of 7 real experiments. I hope you have found this video informative. For now, goodbye.